So Bulgarian, incline dumbbell press, pull up or single arm pull down, Zercher squat, and then the Roman chair. Lateral flexion and hyperextension on the Roman chair. That's all you need to do. I am being as honest as I can be right now. That is it. Bulgarian split squat, incline dumbbell press, pull up or single arm pull down, Zercher squat, and you know, if you want to switch it up, Zercher Jefferson curl, and the Roman chair, your hyperextensions and your lateral flexion. That's it. All right, so we're going to go over Garage Strength's assessment of the strength and conditioning at Iowa, University of Iowa college wrestling program. Now, Garage Strength is a really good source for strength training, conditioning. I've listened to a lot of his stuff. I like his stuff. I just think that when it comes to combat sports, strength and conditioning coaches don't realize how much strength work and conditioning work outside of the sport barely does anything for the top-notch athletes. And, you know, the reasons why, I understand, like, you know, as a coach, as a strength coach, that's your thing. You kind of make that the most valuable part of athletics when it's just not. It's a part. It's not the most important part. And so we'll see what he has to say. But like I said, this is not to be an ass. I like his stuff. Anyways, the reason why I'm saying all this, I wrestled at the Division I level. I wrestled at the University of Oklahoma for a year and a half. I was around really great athletes. I was around Joe Flaggart, Storniolo. I was around Tion Ware, Sammy Hayeswinkle, Zach Bailey, Jeff James, Josh Weitzel. So I was around really good guys, the Terry brothers. So I know what made them successful, and only one person that I mentioned, I feel like they were successful mainly because of their strength, and that's Joe Flaggart. Everybody else was, and Weitzel, Jeff James were good in the gym, but like when it comes to the best, Tion Ware, Storniolo, Sam Hayeswinkle, the Terry brothers, their strength and conditioning in the gym was like subpar. They weren't that strong. They weren't that fast. They were just great wrestlers. So.
And fast. They have to have crazy endurance, and then they have to have a decent amount of muscle mass so that they can handle the grappling aspect. But wrestlers are also uniquely...
Not sure. Well, I definitely don't agree with that. They have to have muscle mass to be able to wrestle. Not true. Lots of skinny, lanky dudes are badass. So Hamzat. Let's just think about Hamzat in the UFC. Not much muscle mass. Tall dude, bigger frame, not much muscle mass. Strong as shit, great wrestler.
Semi-opposed to lifting weights. They don't like to lift as much as you think.
Yeah, because they know that it doesn't actually improve their technical abilities, and that is what separates people at the highest level.
We're going to go into the historic Iowa Wrestling Strength and Conditioning Program, and we're going to start right now. Okay, so if you're a wrestling fan, if you're anybody who's into combat training, you likely have known that Iowa has been absolutely dominant in the realm of wrestling, in the realm of folk-style wrestling, especially up until Cael Sanderson went to my alma mater, Penn State. Now, why should you listen to me as we break down some of these videos? I was the strength and conditioning coach for Nick Wazowski when he was a 2-time world bronze medalist. I've also helped Pete Renda become an NCAA Division I All-American, getting third. I was also the strength and conditioning coach for South Dakota State up until January of 2026. My funding got cut. But while working with South Dakota State, working with Damian Hahn, Cody Caldwell, and helping them develop athletes like Tanner Sloan, working for Clay Carlson, all the way up to everybody that in the last 3.5 years, I think they've had 7 or 8 All-Americans. And then even this past fall, beating Minnesota. Hahn beating Minnesota. So that's my background in wrestling. Okay. Now, when we're looking at wrestling and we're looking at different principles, the whole thing that we're going to cover in this video is what are the principles that they're using at Iowa for strength and conditioning? What are those principles? How are they applying it? And then how can you guys take those principles and then apply it into your own training as a combat athlete? And I think it's a unique scenario where they are posting stuff on YouTube so we can see what they're doing. They're also known for in the wrestling room, just sort of being a bit more aggressive in the wrestling room, maybe not as dialed in technique wise, but just pushing the pace as much as possible. A lot of live wrestling, at least as far as my understanding of their room stuff is concerned. Now let's get into it. Let's see what they're doing. You can see here, so they're doing a seated box jump, right? Seated box jump. What is that going to do? Okay, that's generally where I would say you're working on some type of force development. Okay, so you're going off the box, and we're doing some type of twitch stuff, some footwork stuff here with the lines. So really, when we're thinking through wrestlers, right, I think the hardest aspect around training wrestlers is they've got to have crazy grip strength, right? They've got to be extremely explosive and fast. They have to have crazy endurance, like think 1,500 meters or, you know.
One of the things that people don't talk about when it comes to grip strength is size of hand. That's going to be a huge indicator on your grip strength. And because you're only going to be grabbing wrists, the bigger the hand, the more surface area you can control of the wrist. So that's going to factor way more than kind of like strength. If you don't have a big enough hand to like cover an entire wrist, your grip strength is going to be trash on a forearm, right? So I wouldn't say grip strength is like the most important thing, because a lot of holds are tight waists, underhooks. There's no lock of the hands.
A 5,000 meter guy, they need that type of endurance. And then they have to have a decent amount of muscle mass so that they can handle the grappling aspect and any type of the actual pummeling that goes into this, right? So you have to create a very unique factor.
Disagree with the muscle mass once again. Look at wrestlers. Look at these high-level wrestlers on all these teams. Not that much muscle mass. You know, you're only going to get a lot of muscle mass once you get bigger weight classes. So obviously, because they're bigger, so you know. So the endurance stuff is cool and all to think about in theory, but as a wrestler, you know, every wrestler knows that running preseason, like trying to get in yourself, doing all the, you know, the running, the bike work, the lifting, it actually doesn't get you in shape for wrestling. Only wrestling gets you in shape for wrestling. Ask any high-level wrestler. It's nothing that they do on the bike by itself. It's wrestling, lots of drilling, live goes, and then at the end of practice, doing some sprint work, doing some stairs. It's post-practice cardio training that is actually going to improve your cardio base for wrestling. Nothing standalone. So when I was at the University of Oklahoma, when we were training strength and conditioning, we would run 4 miles. What was that? 5 a.m., 5:30, something like that. We would run 5 miles, and then we would go to the gym and we would lift for an hour. And I was in the worst wrestling shape I'd ever been in my life. It did not add to my wrestling shape at all. I was getting clobbered in the wrestling room and I was gassing out continuously. Only until the start of my second year did I actually get into better wrestling shape, because I was like, this workout on its own, 4 miles and an hour lift, is not bridging the gap here. After practice, after a grueling 2-hour practice, I'm going to hit the stairs and I'm going to do 20 to 30 minutes on it. I started doing that. Within 3 to 4 weeks, I was in amazing shape, and I felt it in practice. So, ask any wrestler. It's what you do right after practice. That's what matters.
When I was working with Gwiz, one of the things that we would do is we would use things like clean on the minute. So we're with Gwiz's case, let's say he did power cleans up to 160 kilos. He would only rest for about 45 to 60 seconds. So every minute he's taking a new rep. Okay. And so what the goal is you want to get somebody really strong and as explosive as you can. So what's their broad jump? What's their vertical jump? But then at the same time, you want to make sure that you can do some type of endurance work and figure out like, okay, do they struggle with aerobic capacity or do they struggle with, high intensity work, anything along those lines? And so that they can win in overtime, right? So you got to figure all that stuff out. And then you've got to make sure that one of the aspects of training is not negating the other aspect.
Exactly. You can't train both at the same time. I'm sorry. This is a strength and conditioning coach's key weakness, simply because of the phrase strength and conditioning. You can't build both at the same time. The body has to work a certain way to gain strength, big rest periods, and to gain cardio endurance improvements. There's a different type of heart rate range that you have to train in, and specifically for what you're trying to improve, different rest periods. So you can't do both at the same time. They will negate each other, and you will end up just wasting your time, tiring the athlete out, overtraining them, not allowing them to recover because of this excess work that's not really improving much because it's not as specific, and you get injured. And if you're a wrestler in college, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
So they're doing those seated box jumps, and they do some shoulder warm-ups, it looks like, and then they're getting into some trap bar work, some trap bar jumps. Now they're doing some Swiss ball. So this would be a hamstring exercise. This glutes I ideally would be a little bit higher. So we're going some glute work. I call these meadow rows. So this would be like a landmine row. This could be like a one-arm row that you would grab with a dumbbell. So I'm going to try and, as we're watching this, we're going to look at these traditional exercises. So they just went through a trap bar. Now they're getting into the landmine meadow row. Looks like this is not a specifically prescribed weight. They're just using a weight that everybody's going to use together. You can see the last kid had the same weight as this dude. And they're going to work through this specific session here. And then we can think through like, okay, what are they doing? This is like classic wrestler who might not want to lift attitude. I think that's the other unique part with the combat athletes. He only did his left side there. Okay, so now
that's very true. But what the first guy was doing is very important for wrestling, is exploding with resistance on repeat. That's actually way more beneficial for a wrestler than to do like hang cleans like Nick was doing with like resting. Big weight. You know, you're never going to be able to exert yourself 100% in a fixed position like that in wrestling, because your opponent is always moving his position and never allowing you to do it. So thinking that that's going to translate that well into a wrestling match is a fallacy that a lot of strength and conditioning coaches will convince wrestlers to believe. It doesn't translate. But exploding constantly, boom, 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 a weight that is not at your max is a realistic expression of a wrestling match. You're pummeling, push, pump, pump, pull, push, you know. Anyways, but it's not for strength gain. It's more for a repeat explosion cardio training. That's not a technical word because if he reacts to this, he's gonna be like, "That's not technical at all," and that's true. But it's the closest thing to speed of sport for wrestling. So that's what you need to be training. You shouldn't be doing too much of it and overtraining, but that type of training is necessary.
I always thought like this could be comparable to what you would have a sprinter doing. Then they're doing hurdle hops there, not bad. Wrestlers are notorious for being super dialed into the minutia and the very specific detail on the mat and like hand placement, all the things that really matter, really, really matter. And all the things that are responsible for the evolution of the sport and how high speed and high tempo it has become. The scrambles are insane now when you watch. But wrestlers are also uniquely semi-opposed to lifting weights. They don't like to lift as much as you think. You know, you'll see guys like AJ Ferrari lifting. You'll see guys like Jordan Burroughs lifting weights, but it's still not that many. It's not that popular, I would say, for a lot of guys. A lot of guys might be anti-lifting and not. And one of my strength coaches was
He nailed it. Because wrestlers understand that there's a point of diminishing returns, and the real gold is spending time on the mat in positions, getting stronger in positions. And trust me, I'm not sure if Garage Strength ever trained in wrestling, or I don't know if he's ever wrestled, but when you wrestle, you realize that's the bread and butter. Getting strong in a position is more about positioning your body against another body than how much you can bench or squat or deadlift. You can't ever translate those strength movements into a wrestling match because you're never actually in any of those positions in a wrestling match. When are you ever in a wrestling match with someone backloaded on you and you have to squat him and then lift him? Never. When are you ever flat to your back where you get to keep your back as flat to the mat as you can and then bench press him off this slowly? Never. You're pinned. It's over. When are you ever lifting something up from the floor in front of you and you can take all the time in the world? Never. So, those lifts are pretty much pointless, and the potential of getting injured in those is just ridiculous. Like you should never be maxing out in any of those three movements. If you're any athlete and you actually want to have a prolonged career and no injuries.
Actually one of my throws coaches was a Soviet coach who worked with Alexander Karelin. And Bondarchuk used to say to me, so Bondarchuk was his name, and he would just sort of help them design their program. One of the things that he would say about Karelin was like, he'd like to do close grip snatches. He would do a lot of Zercher stuff, but then he would just do crazy, crazy mobility and farmers carries, stuff like that. So, okay, so they're doing a skate.
All right, yeah. So one of the greatest Russian wrestlers of all time, undefeated for 10 years, didn't do much lifting. Yeah, because the dude understood that wrestling was the key to wrestling. It's a strength and conditioning coach's nightmare when they're not needed, when they're not really needed at the level that they've been told that they're needed. And the problem is football. Football in college sports has deemed the strength and conditioning coach as super necessary and vital to a football program's success. And I can understand that, but it's inflated the concept of their importance in other sports.
Skater squat here. It almost seems as though they're just showing random exercises.
For a wrestler, this is a phenomenal exercise. Anything single leg, and I think he agrees later on, but like single leg work is phenomenal. I would say for everyone, if you just did single leg work, Bulgarian, skater squats, split squat lunge, whatever, lateral, some type of lateral single leg stuff, that's all you actually need for your lower body. You don't need, to be using two legs at the same time all the time.
Not necessarily a straight up program.
We're not competing this week, so load it up. Oh, shit.
I do really like skater squats for wrestlers. I think it's one of the best ways to really strengthen their quads and get them comfortable on that penetration step. Skater squat, single leg squat. I even think using a single leg squat in what we actually call it a whiz jump, where they would be starting in a skater position and then jumping up to a box. This is
not practical for wrestling. Wrestling, you're never really jumping up. You're exploding forward. So I don't know, it's fancy, strength and conditioning coaches love box jumps. Strength, there's only so much strength that you can build on a skater squat. So there's like a limit before it's like becomes a pointless movement. I would say loading your Bulgarian is the best way to build single leg strength. Like in the most, in the best position that your leg can be in for strength. Skater squat's different. You've got a lot of balance going on. You can't touch that back foot to the ground, so building strength in that's more difficult.
Actually a really cool way to put weight on the pull-ups.
Yeah, I've never
as
seen
crazy as this might sound.
Cool.
I don't know if I've ever seen 7 times body weight.
Okay, let's listen to this.
Most wrestlers, if they could do 20 to 30 pull-ups, back squat 1.5 to 1.7 times body weight, have good dips. I've always felt front squats transfer really well, have good single leg squat strength. And then if you're running, I think a good timed run would be a 5K or assault bike for 5 or 7 minutes. If you're at the collegiate level, probably 7-minute assault bike, 30-minute assault bike as well. So you're doing safe.
So I don't know where he got these numbers from, but I'll tell you right now, they mean nothing. Because like I said, Tion Ware, Sam Hazelwinkle, Storniolo, those guys at Oklahoma, they were all Americans and one was a national champion. Maybe 2 of them were. I can't remember, but none of them. They were shit runners. They weren't that strong. They certainly couldn't do 20 to 30 pull-ups. One of the best wrestlers in the country. Well, Tion, 2-time national champion, I think. So, none of that actually matters. But as a strength and conditioning coach, you create kind of compartments of like what you deem important and like this means you're a wrestler. It just doesn't. You can't gauge wrestling from the weight room. Just it is what it is. Some wrestlers like to lift. Some wrestlers are very strong. Doesn't mean that they are great wrestlers because they're strong. That's the key differentiator there.
Collegiate level, probably 7-minute assault. So this is where they're getting into some RFD stuff off the pins. So think about like when you get to a pin, the different part is that if you do a pin squat versus a full eccentric concentric squat, right? When you stop, you have to ignite, and that's where you would see a traditional increase in rate of force development, which could, in theory, help their vertical jump, in theory. Lots of weighted pull.
And why would someone want to improve their vertical jump if they're a wrestler? As a gauge for their overall explosiveness? Okay, well, how much do you need to explode in wrestling? You're right next to each other. So, that it's just that metric doesn't really mean anything.
Pull-ups here. Some power jerks. I would be a little more skeptical of power jerks just because of the shoulder risk.
I agree.
I'd say too, this is interesting because even if you look at what Cal's doing at Training Lab, I think there's sort of like two, I wouldn't say entirely opposing thoughts in the combat world and combat training. I think there's going to be a more lifting centric version, and then there's going to be more like endurance centric version with functional style. And I think that this would definitely be in a little bit more lifting centric side, obviously. Wrestlers are known for just, lots of sandbags, med ball, kettlebell stuff. This seems to be a little bit more traditional with the weighted pull-ups.
Look, at the end of the day, a lot of lifting for wrestling is injury prevention, really. So if you're doing too much and you get injured, you're defeating the purpose here.
I really like weighted pull-ups, and then with a lot of wrestlers hitting drop sets of, 15 to 20 pull-ups, basically going to failure.
One thing that people don't understand is you gas out in a wrestling match when you can't hold position as well as your opponent. When they're holding position better than you and you're having to combat that constantly and they're getting you out of position, so you're constantly having to fight back to position, it's so much effort and you're gassing yourself out. They're gassing you out by holding position. So it doesn't matter. And they could be weaker than you, and they can be in worse cardiovascular shape than you. But if they constantly stay in good position, force you into bad position so that you have to work out of it, you have to work harder, thus you will gas. So your strength and conditioning doesn't matter. If you're forced to work so hard that you gas, the body can only take a certain amount of effort before it starts to wear down and exhaust. So you can create this amazing engine, but like if someone's making you run it at a high RPM, you're going to run out of fuel and gas, and then that person, your opponent, is going to take advantage of that and beat you.
You take a core group of lifts, like a rope climb is one for me, a power clean, a single leg squat, that 5K run, or a 30-minute assault bike, 7-minute assault bike, and you look through what's their broad jump, right? What's their dip, or how many pull-ups can they hit? So you go through all these different assessments, and then you can analyze with the athlete. Somebody like Gwiz had a great clean, great back squat, good single leg squat. Upper body was strong, not amazing, but pretty damn strong. Bench 400 pounds, right? Like, so you can look at those things and you say, okay, what else is Gwiz good at? Well, he's got a really good engine. Where could he see? What's the low hanging fruit? Well, we could see with him, can we improve his overall cardio, or can we improve his overall explosiveness, his overall like twitch force, right? Like, can we get him to react a little bit quicker? And that's the way I see testing going with wrestlers, is you want to try and build out a testing system, and then off of the testing system, create some type of aspect off the testing system that increases whatever that low-hanging fruit is. I also think doing some type of ISOs here.
Yeah, I understand what he's saying, but it doesn't matter how fast you can explode in the gym where all the parameters are controlled. If you can't do it on the mat where your uncontrolled opponent is moving and you've got to catch him and track him and then get into position and then explode, like, it just doesn't transfer 1-to-1. You're never going to be able to fully use the strength, 100% of the strength and explosion like you on the mat, like you would in the gym. It just doesn't happen. It's not how the sport is. But like, he came up with these metrics, like a rope pull, a power clean, or a rope climb. Okay, this is what I would ask a strength and conditioning coach for wrestlers is like, okay, you've got the number one wrestler in the country, the national champion, okay? His rope climb sucks. Power clean sucks. Single leg squat's okay. 5K run is all right. He can broad jump. He can jump enough. He's not got that far of a jump. And then his dips are okay. His pull-ups kind of suck. So what's the goal now? He's the national champion. Do you try to improve all these metrics in the gym? This, testing system that you've developed? If he's the national champion, the whole point is be national champion. No, you wouldn't. So what's the point in all this strength and conditioning? What's the point in these random tests that you determine are valuable based on an average, based on just overall athleticism in people who compete in sports? Like, athleticism is something that you're born with. You cannot improve the quote unquote athleticism that you have. I really don't believe that, because your athleticism is defined. I'll define it for me. Athleticism is coordination, syncing up your body, your strength, having a certain amount of explosion, obviously coordination, hand-eye coordination, endurance, all these factors, and that's why, like, when we say he's a great athlete, he's a what is a 3-letter athlete or a 4, whatever, when you can run, or when you can play baseball, football, and track. I think those used to be the 3 that like determined you were a great athlete right back in the day. But like if you're a decathlete, decathletes are considered the best athletes because of the events that they do are so difficult. But they they're all different aspects of athleticism expressed in the body. That doesn't make them great wrestlers. That makes them great athletes, and a great athlete can be a decent wrestler. But just because you're a great athlete doesn't make you a great wrestler or a great boxer. There's other qualities that come into play that are more important than just athleticism. When I say athleticism cannot really be improved, your fast twitch muscle fibers, you're born with them. I think you can maybe improve it a little bit, but like if you're naturally fast, you're naturally fast. You were never slow. Slow people were always slow. It's not like slow people, man, I used to be fast when I was like 15, and now that I'm 18, I got slow. That just doesn't happen. If you're slow, you're slow. You can improve the mechanics of your movement so that you can get faster. But as far as your fast twitch muscle fibers are concerned, you have the ones that you have. That explosion is what you have. It is what it is. I can make you more aware of your movement patterns so that you can move more efficiently, which can make you faster, right? You can get from A to B if I teach you how to position yourself off the block a little better. You can shave off some seconds, but like, are you going to like become Usain Bolt? No.
I also think doing some type of isos here that you're seeing there, like chin up, hold, pull up, hold, neutral grip, pull up, hold. I like that one that they just did with the plate. Okay, so some more single leg work. This is where I think single leg squats come into play. I've seen the Yasuda, the hand crank quite a bit. This could improve for, I mean, this is good core work, but I have seen this also for strength endurance, and you can dial this up quite a bit. You know, you can put 20 to 30-second goes on this. You could also go really, really heavy on it. This is going to be my takeaway. I'm gonna stop.
I would say that's kind of a pointless movement because of all the stability needed, and you're not really going through the full range of motion. Kind of like you would in a wrestling match. I think the hand bike where you're going like this, that was for me in college. That was the number one thing that got me conditioned enough to hand fight, because I was losing the hand fighting battle my entire freshman year. It was just so bad, and I was gassing out, and I didn't have my legs under me to begin with, so my arms would just like blow up, and I couldn't do anything but like getting on the hand bike and really focusing on that after practice. That was a huge thing for me.
Here we're about 11 minutes in. I think the biggest takeaways initially as we continue to work through this video. One, what are the main lifts? Okay, so we saw them do the trap bar jumps, we saw the incline bench, we saw heavy weighted pull-ups, right? Then the next pairing of exercises, and they did some power jerks. I would also say, you're seeing some type of strength endurance work. They're doing easy med ball mobility stuff on the side. They're doing some squats from the pins. Okay, that's like the general strength or accessory work. So those are the things that we're sort of seeing laid out right now. If you guys are a combat athlete and you're trying to figure out how do you piece all this together, we have a strength training app known as Peak Strength. Inside Peak Strength, we have combat sports. You can get it for boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, whatever specific combat sport you have. We have a program for you to improve all of your capabilities. Okay, it's the first link in the description. It's the
combat training is actually very simple. There's like, I don't know, 5 movements you actually need to do. Let me tell you: Bulgarian split squat, incline dumbbell press, pull-ups. So Bulgarian, incline dumbbell press, pull-up or single arm pull down, Zercher squat, and then the Roman chair, lateral flexion, and hyperextension on the Roman chair. That's all you need to do. I am being as honest as I can be right now. That is it. Bulgarian split squat, incline dumbbell press, pull up or single arm pull down, Zercher squat, and if you want to switch it up, Zercher Jefferson curl, and the Roman chair, your hyperextensions and your lateral flexion. That's it. As far as strength, the movements to build strength in and to maintain strength. Okay, that's what we need to talk about. Strength and conditioning coaches are always selling you, maybe unconsciously, this idea that you can always improve strength and that improving strength is always the goal. No, it's not. You want to look, if you spend time in the gym, the only improvements after 3 years when it comes to strength are going to be a few pounds a year. Really. Unless you are specifically like a strength athlete and you're just doing crazy feats and you're that guy. You're a strong man. So, but for most people, you'll hit your plateau, and what happens is, because of this lie that you should be improving your strength all the time, you train too much, you push yourself too hard to improve your one rep max or your 3 rep max, and you get injured. So what was it all for? The whole point is to compete. If you're injured, you can't compete. You want to maintain a certain level of your strength. But in order to find out how strong you are, you do have to push yourself and see what that upper limit is. But you also need a coach that lets you know what? You're strong enough. Okay? I want you to do this weight that you can do 10 times, right? I want you to do it 10 sets, but I want you to do 6 reps of it, you know? I want you to keep that weight that you can do 10 times, max out, and I want to put it in a circuit where, you know, you're on the assault bike, and then you have to hit that incline press 2 times. Repeat that. You're not lifting a weight that it's scary, heavy, so you're not going to get injured, but you're forcing yourself to repeat that amount of weight, which is a heavier weight. That's a smart way of going about training. But thinking that you should constantly improving your strength is just not healthy. But as a strength and conditioning coach, it is the built-in problem. You have to sell that because it's a belief. It really is a belief.
Pin comment, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength and make sure that when you're selecting, you want to train for a sport, and specifically you want to train for wrestling. Okay. If you're a coach, or if you're an adult or a parent or somebody who wants to just get in shape, you can train for athletic fitness. But inside there, we're going to go through assessments so that we can see what's your explosiveness level, how much strength and endurance do you have, what's your speed like, and then we're going to build that program based off of your specific weakness. So click that first link in the description. Let's get back to the Hawkeye strength and conditioning. Okay, so they're now getting into some incline bench. I think incline's a great one. Just got to be aware. Sometimes when we were working with South Dakota State, we would have our monthly calls. Sometimes if we were inclining a lot, especially if it wasn't dumbbell, occasionally we'd see some shoulder issues.
That's why I said dumbbell incline press.
I think that's a factor that we got to bring up, is just like making sure that their shoulders are okay. See that fat bar there. And that's the one thing when I think about grip training, I think about grip training through 3 realms. Okay. You got explosive grip, you got iso grip, then you got that dynamic grip that rotates. Okay. So rotating here, explosive, and then just holding it like that old school mat strength. And so doing fat bar
Right. So wrestle more.
curls, that's great for that iso strength. Doing some type of like hammer rotations, that's great for that aspect of grip. And then the final thing that I think a lot of people discount is doing stuff like rope climb. He's doing explosive curls here, maybe a little aggressive on the body English, but he looks like he is trying to target the grip. So bent over rows right after those.
Yeah, this is very common with Russian wrestlers. This is how you train. So, you know, they're the best in the world. We've adopted that type of training, that explosive training, full body. You're working your full body. You're not exploding with a weight that is going to get you injured. So you're being safe. It's not too heavy.
Curls. So it really looks like they're trying to really target the grip. So this is some type of complex here.
Post workout, that is one of the best movements that you could do to build your upper body muscular endurance after a wrestling practice. You get done, you go over, grab some dumbbells or grab a bar like that and just do that. Boom, boom, boom. Rows, rows, rows. Press, press, press. That will build that muscular endurance because you're exhausted already. Now you're overloading and like pushing to build your endurance. But it's in a safe way.
Those are 25, so it's at 95 pounds. Bar is probably 15 kilos. Monkey bars. You get that grip strength work, and you go rope climb, monkey bars, plate flips. Those are the more explosive aspects that I think are underrated. I think farmers carries, fat bar work, those are aspects that are going to be more traditional that you would see. And then I think the rotational stuff is where people actually miss out. Zottman curls, hammer rotations, those are big.
But unnecessary. If you just want to be a great wrestler, unnecessary. We're trying to be a great wrestler. You can get in the minutia of things. Oh, you need to be rotating and, You need it's okay. It can help you. All the majority of strength training is injury prevention. If you're lifting too much weight, you're doing too much volume, you will get injured. So you have to find the happy medium.
For how you can rotate when you have that grip. And then the thing is, in a sport like wrestling, now you can use that to manipulate the head, to manipulate, a specific joint angle that you're trying to hit.
Potentially.
I think crossover symmetry.
Potentially. Theory.
This is good. Common thing.
It would just be better if you were wrestling. If you wrestled and got stronger in the positions of those holds. Those holds are all isometric.
Here and there. So you got to make sure there's. So we got more factor press. Pete could bench 315 for like 5. He'd do rope climbs with like a 60-pound kettlebell around his waist during the rope climb. He would do sled pulls with a rope with 400 pounds. Single leg squat 300 plus pounds. He could power clean 250 all day. And I think it's like it's setting the expectations. Pete was an extremely strong wrestler, right? So I think from a wrestler's perspective, it's like, what are the bare minimums that we should hit? Like,
yes.
I think the numbers can be pretty low. If we got kids in 8th grade that can do, clean 240, well, then I think most collegiate wrestlers, if they weigh over 174, they should be cleaning 240.
No, I think that's where people get it wrong is comparing yourself to others in a lift and then saying, if you're a wrestler, you should be able to do this too. No, just think about it for a second. Why would you say a lift you should be able to do the same amount of weight in a lift that most guys can do, especially if you're a wrestler? It's like, does it translate to wrestling? Yes or no? Is this guy a great wrestler? If he's a great wrestler, would you tell him that? If he's the national champion, would you tell him that? No. Right? And so this is kind of, and I'll stop it here because we're just going to keep going over the same stuff. But Aaron Brooks, one of the greatest wrestlers that come out of Penn State recently, he says he doesn't lift at all. Okay? Doesn't lift at all. In fact, we'll watch that conversation.
So
you don't lift?
I don't lift.
Explain that to me. You look like someone who lifts.
Yeah, everyone says that, but if you ask anyone close to me, they know I don't lift.
What do you do? Push up? What do you do? Bodyweight stuff?
Wrestle. Or even pressuring, snapping, all that stuff. Wrestling.
That was him beating David Taylor, who was the Olympic champion.
Wrestling. Pressuring, snapping, all that stuff. Wrestling.
All right, so I mean, look, that it is what it is. Sorry if it's it's something that pisses people off, but it's just the truth. And strength and conditioning coaches are very strong-willed, one way to put it. And they think, and look, you have to validate yourself. Look, I'm a personal trainer, so I understand what this is. A lot of personal trainers are constantly trying to validate themselves as someone's trainer. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. When most people just need to be doing less bullshit and like 5 things that are actually beneficial. So, when you ask a personal trainer to write you a program and they've got all this mobility work in there and all these accessory exercises and way too much volume, and you're training 7 days a week, like for an hour, it's too much, but people will push back on me saying this because that is how you validate yourself as a trainer. I'm just not that trainer. I'm just not going to bullshit you because I've trained at the highest level of college sports. I've seen the best wrestlers and how they compete and how they train. And what they do in the weight room doesn't make them national champions. Case in point, Aaron Brooks talking right there. It's just not going to make you the national champion. It's not going to make you as good as Aaron Brooks. Aaron Brooks is a great wrestler because he's a great wrestler. He puts in so much time wrestling. And look, here's the deal. Every Penn State wrestler, when they're asked, how is the program so good? Like, what are you guys, what's Cael Sanderson doing over there? Blah, blah, blah. They all say, practice is fun. They learn a lot. Cael doesn't yell at them and reprimand them. And they're wrestling all the time. And they're wrestling the highest level athletes all the time. So that's how you get better. The Olympic development program, right, that Penn State has, they got the best wrestlers in the nation there. And so as a college athlete, you get to train with guys competing on the international level every day. And these guys are ex-national champions in college. So when you're wrestling national champion after national champion, Olympic champion, world champion every day in the college wrestling room, and then you wrestle another guy in college, everything they do you've already seen. And you've seen it at a higher level, at a faster pace, with better positioning, with better poise, and it doesn't phase you. So, look, I like Garage Strength, and if you want to build strength and conditioning, he's a great source to go to. But when it comes to strength and conditioning for wrestling, you got to wrestle more. Iowa is known for excessive amounts of work. They prioritize themselves, the Brands brothers prioritize themselves on just doing more volume, more volume, more volume. Ben Askren was such a huge contrarian when it came to the Iowa style of wrestling, the Iowa style of training. And he bucked against that, developed his own method, where he was just wrestling all the time. He'd do 60-minute matches, and he was just always wrestling, getting better at wrestling. And he was a 2-time national champion, world champion in MMA. Not a strong guy. Dude can't run. Dude probably can barely do any pull-ups. But he got better at wrestling through wrestling. So, anyways, I don't do this to be disparaging to Garage Strength at all. Like I said, he's got great content. It's just, this is my thing. As a wrestler, competing at the Division I level, in the room every day, and then being a personal trainer to adults, I never fell into the bullshit that the personal training world tells you to do, which is like, all this volume, all these movements that you have to do all the time, because it's like, okay, what's the goal? What are you trying to do with this improved strength, or what is this movement getting you closer towards? What I value is the ability to wrestle and to strike. Mixed martial arts is the goal. I don't need to be good at baseball or basketball or football. I need to be good at combat. And if I'm good at combat, I'm in great condition. I'm strong enough. I've maximized or, gotten my strength up to a certain point to engage with other high-level athletes, competitors in these disciplines. I'm going to train my clients like I train, because it's more valuable. Being able to defend yourself as a combat athlete and to compete in combat sports is more valuable than being good at the gym. So that's my argument. It took me an hour to make it.